blessings He's given to us in our life, and show Him in our everyday walk how much we really do love Him. And always remember, it's not about us, it's about Him. It's not about us, it's about Him. Everything we do, we've got to do it for Jesus. We've got to sing His praises everywhere. We cannot stop or turn around. We've got to preach the gospel to help the light of Jesus to shine on. Because it's not about us, it's about Him. We've got to sing His praises everywhere. We cannot stop or turn around. We've got to preach the gospel to help the light of Jesus to shine on. Because it's not about me, no, it's not about you. I said it's not about us, it's about Him.
The Atkins family. It's not about us.
If all the rocks and rivers suddenly could sing, and the valleys whispered songs of praise to heaven's highest king, if all the stars together lighting up the sky shone as one to spell the name of Him who reigns on high, the wonders would only start to tell how great You are, even greater than creation can come.
He's future. That's a future politician right there. He's shaking hands. How you doing, John? I'd like to say good morning to y'all. Whenever Lois is ready, we'll get started. Good to be in God's house this morning, isn't it? Anybody have a spoken prayer request before we go?
Remember Aaron Cody?
Okay. All right, Bruce. John?
My brother's traveling back to Ohio.
Okay. Ruby?
Never be our family now. I'm just waiting to wait and that's surgery in
Okay.
I have an special unspoken, and a coworker and a friend of mine, Billy Greer, had a stroke around Easter or whatever. I ran into Billy and his wife Karen last night. He's doing really well, and if you didn't know him, you wouldn't have known he just had a stroke. But he is struggling with his speech a little bit, and just with weakness. So yes, that would be great.
Okay. Brother?
Remember me and my family, and remember my mother and mom, remember my two brothers, remember Taylor and the family.
Remember my sister Nancy and my brother Scott. Remember Brooklyn, she has her boards coming up next week.
Any others?
You'll remember Buddy and Georgia Freeman and her sister. Remember our nation and Russia and Ukraine, our missionaries and our law enforcement. And Gwen has a test tomorrow, so remember her. And Mary and Lois, they're doing better.
Any others?
Remember all the loss in my family, some sickness here and there. Last week, my buddy passed away. His name is Joe Massey. Remember the Massey family? He left too soon. He's got 4 kids. Like, the youngest one's like a year-old, pretty young, maybe 2 years. But he's a good dude. Like, he could take in a run of times and still make us smile. He'll be missed.
Any others?
And I'd like for the church to just help us pray this week that his leg will heal. He does have an appointment on Friday with the wound specialist, but I would love to just let him get there and they say it's all good. So, and Amanda does have awards this week. So.
Any others? Let's be mindful of our lesson today as we gather here and we look into God's Word. Let's just ask for Him to help us have an open heart, open mind, and we just see what He has in store for us today and just enjoy the Lord's Day, right? Isn't that what this is?
Yeah.
Amen. With that, I ask you to stand. And John, if you'd lead us out this morning, please.
Lord, we are grateful.
Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this our daily bread. Give us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but us from evil. Thy kingdom, thy glory.
Amen. Well, today we're at page 64 of our quarterly, lesson 10. And it's titled, Jesus is Come. So if we go, where are we at compared to kind of moving along in chronological order from last week? Remember last week we were in chapter 23 of Matthew. And Jesus warned the multitude that was there in the temple, and He warned His disciples and His followers of the evils of the scribes and Pharisees. Then He turned to the scribes and Pharisees and let them have it. He told them, He pointed out different specific things that they were wrong about, and He called them woes. All these woes that He had warned them of, He brought those out in chapter 23. So right now, chapter 24, where we're at today, that event has passed. Now He's with His disciples. They have moved over to Mount Olive, just He and His disciples for some time together. They're on the mountain and they're looking down at the city. And they see, remember the Passover is occurring, okay? So there's like 1 million people in Jerusalem at this time. And you can imagine the view that they see there. There's a lot of people gathered. It's a busy time. He has turned His back on the church, on Jerusalem, on the religious leaders of the Jewish church. He's done with them, okay? Now He's with His guys, His disciples. and they're looking down upon the city. So that's kind of where we start today, here in chapter 24. And we'll begin reading. I'll read the first verse. You guys read after me, and we'll discuss this. Verse 1 says, And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple.
And Jesus said unto him, See not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down.
And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world?
And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you.
For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many.
And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet.
For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences, earthquakes in divers places.
All these are the beginning of sorrows.
Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake.
And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another.
And many false prophets shall arise, and shall deceive many.
And because of iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold.
But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved.
And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come.
Amen. All right, so let's go back to the beginning here, verse 1. Now, we talked about where they're at. They're up on the mountain. Picture this scene. They're looking down on the temple. The temple is quite a impressive facility. This thing is 500 yards long, about 400 yards wide, made of white marble with gold plates. There's gold plates in the design, gold plates. So they're looking down upon this. And the disciples, the way that they address this question or this comment to Jesus, you can tell they're in awe of what they see. They really, you've got to remember the temple at this time, was the center of Jewish life. I mean, it was the place. It took 80 years to build this, okay, just to give you an idea. And at this time, there was still some construction going on. It wasn't completed yet, but yet it was still quite a sight to behold. And the disciples are in awe of this. And in verse 2, and Jesus says unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. You have to think that this is a bombshell to the disciples. They're like, Jesus, look at this. Look at the temple, how grand, and Jesus is not in awe of the temple itself like they are. He said this is great, magnificent place to them, and Jesus is like these things. To him, it's just a thing. That's what he called it. So, you got to, I thought about that. There's an indifference compared to how the disciples feel about the temple and what Jesus. He didn't look upon it as the splendor and the awesomeness that the disciples had. He had a different take. And when he says, not one stone should be left here upon another, now he is prophesying. There's a lot of prophecy in today's lesson. And here's the first prophecy in today's text, that the temple would be destroyed. He lets them know. And you got to think, this is probably crushed them, They just imagine, hey, Jesus, look at this. Look how great this is. And then Jesus says, something's going to be destroyed. You have to think that really was a bombshell to the disciples. And we know, it's historically a fact that 40 years after this conversation Jesus had with these disciples, the Romans leveled the temple. Okay, it was destroyed. So already that prophecy played out in fairly quick manner, if you ask me. And Jesus, in his comment to them, he says not one stone would be left upon another. So how was that possible? How could one stone not be left upon another? Why would it be dismantled to that effect? You would think if something was destroyed, there'd still be like a remnant, maybe part of a wall or something. Remember I told you this thing had gold in its construction? When the Romans destroyed it, they set it on fire. And the gold from the heat melted and ran into the cracks and crevices of the structure. So with the Romans later, to retrieve the gold, they had to do exactly what Jesus said. They took this thing apart to that degree just to get the gold. So Jesus' prophecy played out to be accurate as always, but that's how it happened. The gold ran into the cracks and crevices between the stones, and the Romans dismantled it completely to get the gold. I thought that was interesting how that prophecy was realized just in 40 years after he made mention of it happening. Verse 3 says that he sat upon the Mount of Olives, his disciples came to him privately. Now, think about what he just told them. He dropped the bombshell on them, didn't he? Now, they've kind of probably gotten together and they're discussing this, and now they're going back to Jesus and they're asking him two questions. And it's in verse 3. The disciples came to him privately saying, "Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world?" So he's got them thinking. So Jesus' prediction brings up two questions. When will this be? And what will be a sign? So with that, the next few verses, verses 4 through 8, Jesus describes the condition of the world, what's going to happen between his ascension, and he goes back, and between his return, which we're waiting on, his second coming now. So what Jesus does in the next handful of verses, he tries to answer the disciples' questions. He tells them that there will be conditions of the world during this period between his ascension and his second coming. And we're in that period now, right? So what are some of the things that Jesus warns them about? So I just pulled a few phrases out of those verses from 4 through 8. He says, "Take heed that no man deceive you." There's going to be much deception, and especially during the tribulation period. Now, I didn't want to go into the tribulation period. That's not what this lesson is, but there is a tribulation period. I think that's a different lesson. I think the key to today's lesson is he's coming back, okay? And we're going to try to leave it at that. But anyway, there will be a second coming. He is coming back. But many will be deceived while they await his return, okay? And we see it taking place now. Don't we see deception? So in my looking at this, and I didn't know this before I started studying. Here's an example of someone deceiving the public on the fact that Jesus would return. In 1844, there was a guy named William Miller. He concocted this prophecy based on some calculations he dreamed up that Jesus was going to return in 1844. And it was a big deal. You know, it was promoted, it was broadcasted, but it didn't happen. And as a result, there was a great falling away. A lot of people were discouraged. A lot of people left the church. People were disillusioned, you know, because they believed some deceiver, right? But he was playing on the fact that Jesus is coming back. So he used a truth. Jesus is coming back, but he created his own little, you know, smoke screen, if you will, or deceiving people. So that happened. And other new cults would spawn, you know, based on the fact that Jesus would come back. They created their own little denominations, their own little entities, you know, to just continue to deceive people. Peter warned of it in 2 Peter 2:1. He said there will be false prophets among the people, even as there are false teachers among you who privately bring damnable heresies. Is this not happening today? Yes. Unfortunately, there's people probably gathered this morning that are totally bought in to the wrong thing, okay? And I'll just leave it at that. But there are damnable heresies being taught and people are being deceived today across this land. It's still happening today. The deceivers are still at work, are they not? Creating this disillusion, capitalizing on people's sincere desire for something to fill that void in their life. Is it happening? We know it's happening. You bet. Another phrase I pulled out of here, out of those 4 or 5 verses, he says, many shall come in my name. Have there been individuals that had that charisma that could draw people in, that claimed to be Christ or be the Messiah? Anybody know of a couple? Jim Jones is one. Yeah, that's right. That's a good one. He had that ability, didn't he? He was a deceiver. Drink the Kool-Aid. Drink the Kool-Aid. David Koresh, remember? Yeah. Yeah. Same idea. Deceivers, that's what these guys were. Another phrase was, all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So, he tells them basically, prior to my second coming, these things are going to come to pass, but it's not the end just yet. And he says wars, rumors of wars. Have we seen that in our lifetime? Every day. We've seen it historically. Now, I don't know how, I just pulled this as some other guy's research, not mine, but this is interesting. Since 3600 BC, there's been 14,351 wars. 3.6 billion people killed. Man will never resolve the problem of war as long as he inhabits this earth before the Prince of Peace comes, right? That's when the wars will stop. United Nations can't prevent it, can they? The League of Nations can't prevent it. No. There'll be no peace until he comes and settles things. He mentions false teachers, wars, famines, pestilence, earthquakes. Have we seen that? Yeah. Well, we just came through a pandemic, didn't we? A pestilence, if you will. Catastrophes will happen. But he says they don't signal the end just yet. He mentions that. So these are characteristics of an entire age, but they're not the signs of the end. So because he remembered in verse 6, the end is not here yet. So these things are going to happen, but the end is not here yet. He says all these things are the beginning of sorrows. Are we in that time now? I think we are. Are we not in that time that he is prophesying? I mean, I was going to try to keep amillennial, premillennial, and all that out of my lesson, but I think that we are in that period, personally. But that's just, that's you can believe what you want on that, but I just remember he is coming. But I think we're in the beginning of that period now. We're in that time he called the beginning of sorrows. Don't we see these troubles increasing and more frequently? I think we do, absolutely.
Just reading that verse, not yet gives me shivers.
I know.
I mean, it does.
It's going to get worse. The end is not yet. So somewhere in my study, I found a comparison of the end times and a woman giving birth. The travail. And it's interesting. A woman in labor, you ladies know about it, obviously, about to give birth will have really one hard pain, but then it subsides, right? There's a gap of some rest, and then you have another hard pain. But as you get closer to your time, those pains happen quicker, don't they? Until it's time. Well, there's been some reference made where humanity and the end times are like the travail of a woman. You know, those tribulations, those troubles that we have as humans experience, they're going to be more frequent and more intense as we get closer to the day. And in the lady's case, as she gets closer to deliver. I thought that was interesting when I ran across that. John chapter 16, verse 21. A woman, when she is in travail, has sorrow because her hour has come. But as soon as she's delivered, she remembers no more the anguish. So I thought about that. When he comes, it's going to be peace, isn't it? The anguish is going to be over. Like when Mama delivers. It's over. It's peacefulness. It's relief. It's joy, right? That's what we got to look forward to as Christians, right? When he comes back. So I thought that was interesting how they tied the similarity of birth pains with this spiritual pain and anticipating Jesus' return. How there was a comparison there. Any questions so far? I've done a lot of talking, and it's your turn. Verse 9. Then, so those when we looked at 5, 6, 7, 8, I just pulled some phrases out of those verses. If anybody has anything that we've skipped and you want to discuss, you know how we do it here. Just fire away. Verse 9, then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. They shall deliver you up. Who is you? Who is you? When I read that, I'm thinking, who's he talking about? You know, he's talking to his disciples.
Yeah.
Right? But think about it. I thought of them first.
I think it's the body of Christ.
I think so. I got 3 different entities in here that he's talking to.
Different employee.
But no, you're onto something, Scotty. I agree. I think we all are going to face some level of tribulation and persecution because of our stance. Absolutely. The ones he was speaking to privately, the disciples, they will face persecution. They go through some horrendous persecution. Secondly, is you, Israel. Look at the anti-Semitism we've seen. Look at the enemies that the God's nation, God's homeland has against it. Is that gone away? No. You know, think about that. Could he be talking to the Jewish people, the Israel, the country? The Holocaust, I thought about that. Surrounded by nations that hate them, despise them, you know. They're facing some level of persecution, if you will, just because of their stance, right? Then to Scotty's point, and I got in my notes, could he be talking to us? The body, the believer. Some folks say the church will be taken up before the tribulation. Some say otherwise. Regardless, he's coming, okay? But that aside, Don't we see today a shift in society where they're against us in some ways? Right? I mean, I haven't felt any physical violence, and I hope you haven't either yet. But don't you see just a shift in society in general that's demeaning towards us, or because of where we believe, or we're looked down upon, or made fun of? You know, that's low level of persecution, isn't it? It's, in a sense. I mean, go ahead. Somebody got something to add, Ruby?
And when you take a stand against things that the Bible
Yeah.
speaks about,
Yeah.
then you hate those people, and
Yeah.
that's not what Christian does. They don't hate them, they just hate their style of living, stuff that we still, they consider, you hate us, which is not true.
I also, it's been rolling around in my head for the last couple of minutes, that, people are gonna be so miserable. And when I say the word people, other than Christians, other than believers, gonna be so miserable, they're gonna look at us and see the joy that we have and that we possess and the freedom that we walk about with. And rather than inquire where to get it, they're gonna try to raise us up and, for lack of better words, office, whatever, like they did Christ.
Well, to get that peace, they have to appeal to a higher power, and they can't. They can't do that.
Yeah.
You know, that's a good. If the Lord tarries long enough, we may see more intense persecution come our way, right?
It's happening on social media. Like a lot of people that profess their belief in Christ and how good their life is and stuff, there's people commenting, not necessarily on my stuff, but I see it everywhere. There's people commenting, I wish people would stop telling the people how good, about their view of things and how good their life is, because it ain't really like that, or whatever, you know what I mean? And it's sad,
Yeah.
because it really is like that.
True.
All you do is have to believe.
Tim, I believe that, I believe we will suffer here for a while,
Yeah.
because I think that's one of the ways God's going to test our faith.
Yeah. True.
To see if we're going to hold true to what He set before us. If we can't do that, then He sets up that tribulation. We're going to be back behind. We're not exactly where we need to be. So
That's right.
It's not just a cut and dry salvation, as the old timers used to say. We need to really, and even as of late, it crosses my mind every day. Are you really truly ready? Are you
Yeah.
really ready? What more can I do, Lord?
Yeah.
Because you're persecuted in lots of ways,
Yeah.
even right now.
Yeah.
And you're seeing it.
Verses 10 and 11. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall arise, and shall deceive many. Will betray one another. This persecution, and that Donna just talked about, will reveal the traitors, won't it? It'll reveal the weak. It will. False prophets will arise. And that's happened. That happened, Peter wrote about it. I mean, it was happening in the early church. It's continued today. And it's just going to get worse. It's like, we're talking about those labor pains, how they get more intense and more frequent. That's just another symptom. There's going to be more of that. There's going to be more of the false teaching out there, the deceivers we talked about a while ago. It's been happening since the inception of the church, and it's going to continue. The false prophets and deceivers. And verse 12 was, I had really studied this before this text this much, and verse 12 hit me. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. And I thought, how important is love? That verse made me think about that. Love, think about love, the brotherly love that you have for one another. It is very important for the vibrant church, is it not? It's like, I think it, along with God's Spirit, are like the energy, right? That we feel, and it's very important. It adds life to the church. But this is a discouraging passage to me, and it's scary because all those outside influences that we just talked about, the wars, the rumor of wars, the pestilences, the false teachers, all that is on the outside. But this verse right here, verse 12, tells me now it's influenced the inside. Do you see that? Satan has found a way to get in to the body of the church here. Because the iniquity abound, all those things outside the church, it's just because it just keeps coming at us, and coming at us. Finally, there's going to be certain people it's going to affect their heart.
Do you think that talks about the love we have for others or the love we have for ourselves?
I think it's talking about the love we have for others. That's what I think. This iniquity, this lawlessness will be so prominent that people are just going to cave, and yeah, then it opens up the other love that you talk about, love for self, and you don't think about your brother anymore like you did before. And that's what I believe. But it says, cause the love of many to wax cold. To me, that's worse than the persecution and the pestilence on the outside. Don't you agree? Because now it's affecting who once was believers. It says now they're going to wax cold. It has crept into the church, this lack of love, leading to a falling away, leading to cold hearts. That's another reality. These are the words of Jesus. He's warning us on this. It's so that verse kind of hit me hard when I read that. How important is love? And it's the glue in it that keeps this church together, I think, along with His Spirit. The two working together, don't they? But however, there is relief when you look at verse 13. It says, there's that word but, and we're glad of that, right? But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. Here's that hope, right? Here's that opportunity. Difficult times call for perseverance, don't they? Enduring to the end is what they said in the verse.
That word endure, that means we're going to go through some stuff.
That's exactly right. But don't enduring create stronger, give you more strength? Yeah. It seasons you, it strengthens you. But that merciful God, even though love is waxed cold, we just read about it in the previous verse, that merciful God still has the love for those that endure, and those will be saved. Give us that rescue from this calamity that's happening all around us. He provides that. So remember earlier in our text we talked about signs of the times. That's pretty big in this lesson. But not one of them alone specifically pointed to the end. Okay? However, notice here this last one does. It says in verse 14, "And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then the end shall come." The gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then the end shall come. Here Jesus promises that before the end, the gospel would go out to all the world. The persecution, we talked about the pestilence, the false prophets, the wars, the cold, indifferent hearts of the people that have fallen away from the church, the general downgrade of society that we see does not prevent the spread of the gospel. Now, some claim that's already happened. The gospel has been spread. If so, then our time is even closer, isn't it?
That's right.
And I thought about that, Luke, with the advent of technology. You know, there's people in heathen countries with internet. Have they not? I mean, maybe their government filters out what they see, but let's think about, has technology sped this process up of the gospel being spread? Something to think about, isn't it?
Well, you got radio stations in places that never could have gotten there before too.
You know, I think technology.
Sorry?
That scripture was always puzzling for me, I guess, but now, you know, if you understand what he said with all the technology, it always,
Yeah.
it was puzzling to me, you know.
Yeah. Any day now. Any day now is what I do. Mike Monk?
And yes, too, is, we're outreach in other countries. We've got people in our own countries who don't have work.
That's true. That's true. That's true. So we have a job to do, don't we? If we're out there spreading the gospel, like we're the Great Commission, right? We could help speed this process along, couldn't we? Come and get us, Jesus.
That's right.
So anyway, looking back on our lesson, just a few things that we'll take away. There's different views regarding the timing of Jesus' return. But really, I think the key is he is returning. Regardless of where you're premillennial, postmillennial, amillennial, that's a whole different lesson, I believe, in trying to explain all that. But just remember, he is returning. And we have seen the severity of those pains, haven't we? They're intensing more and more. They're getting more intense. They're happening quicker, like the birth pains we talked about across the world. We've seen pestilence. We've seen false prophets. We've seen them falling away. We've seen a society that has turned their back on God, more and more disconnected from the laws of God. And I also thought about this. Think about our title, Jesus is Coming. That's the title today. We don't really understand what's in store. It's kind of confusing. Just keep in mind that he is coming. But remember this. The first coming of the Messiah, he came here to suffer, didn't he?
Yeah.
And you think about how improbable that is, that the Son of God would come down to this place, leave all of that, and come here to suffer for you and I. Think about that. It's not at all preposterous to think that he's going to come back again and reign. If he would go through all of that the first time, you absolutely know he's coming back, right? Anybody got anything to add?
We could look at things as God gave us the greatest gift that we could ever receive, through Christ. love would be a gift, family would be a gift, Jesus is definitely a gift, you know. The world is a gift, you know, and I personally feel like, and this just came to me actually, I personally feel like when he comes back, we're going to be judged on how we handle those gifts, you know, like how we treated others, how we treated the gift of Christ, how we reacted to it, how we treated the world, so to speak, you know, whether we threw a trash out the window or whatever happened, you know. I think that's pretty interesting.
All right, appreciate your all's attention.